Hi everybody. In this video I'm covering gathering evidence, or also known as collecting data. Well, the first thing that we need to consider when collecting data is to first understand our data needs. So in order to figure out what data I would need to collect for a particular project within an overall assessment plan, I need to first think about what's the outcome or the issue being assessed. And so I actually approach trying to answer these four questions when I'm either helping folks think through assessment needs, help folks plan their assessment process for their department. And I also use this in planning my own research projects. So I start off with trying to answer the question of what do I need to know? So if I have an issue and what I need to know are student perceptions, then that's what I need to know. I need to know student perceptions about on-campus dining. So why do I need to know this? And this can be a tough question to answer sometimes, but it's one that we really need to ask ourselves. Because if the answer is, well, I need to know it because the answer hopefully will help us understand student perceptions about on-campus dining because we have a series of organizational outcomes connected to the on-campus dining experience. But if the answer is, oh, I just think it would be interesting, then we really need to think about whether or not we need to actually collect that data through that particular process. The third question, what kind of data will answer the questions? So if I want to know about student perceptions, that's often answered through a survey. I could also learn about student perceptions through focus groups or individual interviews. And it depends on what do we really want to know and why do we want to know it, which will help us figure out which method we need. And I'll touch on methods in this video as well. And then the fourth question, where can I find the data? Well, if we are going to administer a survey to students about on-campus dining, I probably want to have a sample that is largely comprised of students who partake in on-campus dining. But then I probably also want to have some sort of probability that some respondents will not have engaged with on-campus dining, or at least not done so regularly. And so it really depends on how are we framing our question in terms of what do we need to know and why we need to know it. So I use campus dining purposefully as an example because we are currently in a process at our institution of campus dining and other auxiliary units being evaluated and scrutinized. And so an external consulting firm sent out a survey to, I don't know if it was the entire campus or to a sample of folks on campus. And they included, if it was a sample, they included a wide range of people and did not actually look at usage data because faculty and staff were included, and not all faculty and staff swipe their ID or put money on their cards to use in the dining facilities. Oh, sorry about that. Gotta love when things pop up during a recording. So we need to think about what our needs are when it comes to data and where we're going to get the data that will help us answer those questions. So I mentioned a couple of examples of evaluation methods that we would use to answer our question about perceptions of on-campus dining. And so from a very generic perspective, we have three evaluation methods at our disposal. We have quantitative methods, which would be numeric in nature. We have qualitative methods, and then we have mixed methods. But when it comes to answering the questions, we really have to make sure that we've got a clear sense of the research design for each part of our assessment plan. And one of the things that I'm going to address in the next video is our over-reliance on surveys. And the videos on YouTube actually kind of get on that to a small degree as well. So how do we determine which research design to use? Well, if you'll recall from ADM630, we have a couple of different, or several different research designs to think about. And I'm addressing non-experimental here and not experimental, because when it comes to assessment practice, we're not really concerned with conducting experiments. That's generally not the type of approach that we use in our efforts to assess organizational performance, student learning, and the like. So we might set up a descriptive study where we're just trying to figure out who's using something, who partakes in a particular program or service, what are the characteristics of their users, of those users. Comparative studies, where we're comparing one group to another or multiple groups to each other. Maybe we're trying to identify a normative group and comparing other groups to that normative group. Correlational studies would be looking at relationships, whether we're just wondering, is there a relationship? And then the other dominant form of correlational study would be those that are predictive in nature. So does participation in X lead to some sort of change or modification in Y? The author of the textbook in ADM 630 likes the term causal comparative as a type of research design. I'm not a fan of that term because we really cannot look at causation in non-experimental research designs. In order to get anywhere close to identifying causation, we really need to engage in experimental research. And in the social sciences, it's really tough to say that one thing causes another, because there's so many potential confounding variables that exist within the human experience. Ex post facto designs would be those where we're looking at existing data on the back end and they're related to correlational studies, and generally we're looking to determine if there's some sort of cause and effect. And I use that term very loosely because, again, we cannot really get at causation. We are never able to actually prove anything in social science research. But the best that we can do is say that there's a high probability that a change in an independent variable results in a change in a dependent variable. And so that's what we get at with correlational studies that are predictive in nature and ex post facto designs that are predictive in nature, where we're using existing data. And survey research, it's what it sounds like. We send out a survey, we get responses, and we try to see are there connections. Oftentimes, surveys become descriptive in terms of here's what participants reported. There are a lot of flaws in relying on surveys too heavily. One of the big dangers with surveys is that we are relying entirely on self-report. And so I've seen a lot of surveys where we ask students to self-report their grade point average, self-report the number of hours they study in a week, self-report the amount of time that they devote to self-improvement. And as you can see, I'm just rolling with the flaws, just as if we were in class together in a classroom. And so when we rely on self-report, we've got to put a lot of trust in participants. And one of the things that has been observed through survey research is through some follow-up studies. There's been a connection made that suggests that people overestimate, particularly when it comes to things like how many hours do you study in a week. Students often overestimate that, which really leads to over-reporting in surveys. So, as I mentioned in the next video, I'm going to touch on some other dangers with surveys. So, with that said, when should you use a survey for assessment? So I've posted two videos from YouTube on Canvas under the heading Perspectives on When to Use Surveys. And one of them also includes some tips to think about when constructing a survey. When it comes to qualitative research, one of the key features is that the research is conducted in a natural setting. And sometimes I think that terminology can be a little misleading or off-putting. It's not that we're going into someone's natural habitat and observing them or anything like that. It's the natural setting is that so in the case of an interview, for example, it's two people sitting down and talking. There's nothing manipulated. There's no experiment. It's nothing like that. If we are engaging in observation, we're not trying to manipulate anything. We are observing people as they interact. We're observing people as they have experiences. And in qualitative, we get data directly from the source. So either through interviews, we might conduct an analysis of documents. So looking at policies. We try to develop what's known as rich narrative descriptions. So we use the data that we collect, whether it's from interviews, focus groups, or existing documents, and when we engage our analysis and our reporting, we use significant chunks of that data to illustrate pieces of the findings in the form of an ongoing narrative. And part of what we're interested in from qualitative perspectives is how and why behaviors occur. And of course, we do have mixed methods designs. So we might have a sequential explanatory design, which is where we use quantitative approaches first to then inform qualitative approaches. There's sequential exploratory, where we take a qualitative approach first and use that to then inform a quantitative research study. And then there's concurrent convergent, where qualitative and quantitative data collection methods are employed simultaneously and not relying on one to inform the other. So I'll talk through examples of or what this might look like. So for sequential explanatory, this is where we develop a survey instrument, send it out, we analyze it, and we see that maybe we conduct a factor analysis. What are the most significant combinations of survey items? And we identify those, and then maybe we use those to drill down to some focus group or interview questions. And then so our interview protocol is framed based on responses to the survey. In sequential exploratory, we conduct our qualitative investigation first, and through our analysis, we see that maybe we determine what are the most salient themes from the data, and then we construct a quantitative study around that. Again, often it comes in the form of a survey instrument. And then, as I said, with concurrent convergent designs, the qualitative and quantitative do not inform each other. They are developed side by side and administered often at the same time. So we're not waiting for results from one aspect of the study to inform the next aspect of the study. So mixed methods, it's a combination of qualitative and quantitative methodology, data collection, and analysis, and they're integrated. Mixed methods is not simply gathering some combination of qualitative and quantitative. I sometimes hear students and other folks, not just students, people with earned doctorates, talk about mixed methods from the perspective of, well, I'm going to send out a survey, and then at the bottom of each section, I'm going to have some open-ended questions. And so, that means that makes those questions qualitative, and so I'm doing a mixed method study. No. The addition of textual data does not simply make something qualitative. there's nothing wrong with including open-ended questions and then analyzing that data that's collected from a qualitative perspective and treating it in a rigorous manner. That's great. I don't know that that's necessarily mixed methods, though. Really, when the driving piece is the survey instrument itself with the Likert scales or whatever other type of items are on it that are numeric in nature, the inclusion of open-ended spaces for textual data, in my mind, doesn't necessarily make it a mixed methods perspective. And so one of the other things that we need to think about is managing all this data that we collect. And I'm going to address that in the next video.